June the 7th, 2022 meeting of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board under the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. This meeting is called to order at 10 a.m. Ms. Luna, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mariel Fernandez.
Here.
Dr. Joyce Mock.
Here.
Carol Sloan.
Here.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski.
Here.
Laurie Snyder.
Here.
Brian Finley.
Here.
And Dr. Gordon Borland, presiding officer.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the members being available to meet. We have some important information to cover. At this time, we will now have some open government training presented by Jessica Escobar.
Dr. Borland, this is Mary Winston, TDLR.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to, pop in just briefly in realizing that we had 2 new members. I wanted to then say from staff, thank you for your service and welcome. And just a couple of notes that, as you noted, that this meeting was posted, the agenda was posted, and yes, Jessica, our Assistant General Counsel, is about to go over many things, including the Open Meetings Act, which also is an agenda item below. Your participation and appreciation in the meeting is definitely sought, and we do our best to stay within the noticed agenda items. This sounds rudimentary, but discussions will be discussed and presentations will be observed. And if there is other information that needs to be sought out after those times, we will place them on an agenda item for a future meeting. We also have, I think, 1 public commenter for this meeting. And this public comment, new members, because I don't want to say old members, the seasoned members know this, is to give the public a time to give their voice. It's not an agenda item in which we interact. It's an agenda item that allows them 3 minutes to address us and the public. And if there are any questions that we would have following that, that would have to be put on another agenda item for the future. Questions at that time would be, during that presentation, would be clarifying questions. Hear that person. And you say, you know, what was that or something like that. But it's not a discussion. It is their time, and we allow them to have that. So that's my little break-in spiel. Forgive me, Dr. Borland. And Jessica has a lot of great information for us today.
If I may just postpone just one more moment after that introduction, Jessica. Just one reminder to the board members: when you speak, please be sure to state your name as you begin. So that makes it easier for people viewing to know that, and for the persons taking minutes. Also, again, I was remiss, I want to welcome Ms. Fernandez and Mr. Finley to the board, new members. We appreciate their willingness to volunteer their time to participate in this important function for the public. So thank you. So now, Ms. Escobar, I think I'm through.
Thank you, Dr. Borland. Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel. So Dr. Borland and members, thank you for joining this morning. I'm going to share my screen and I'll be providing you with our open government training this morning. All right, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Yes. No? All right, let me try this again. How about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will be doing your open government training this morning, and we will be covering 3 topics this morning. We're going to start with the Open Meetings Act, cover the Administrative Procedures Act, and the Public Information Act. So the Open Meetings Act is why we're here. We're going to be covering that this morning. The purpose of the Texas Open Meetings Act is to ensure transparency in an open government. The Act requires that all meetings of open governments to be open to the public and be preceded by public notice, and make sure that we're providing the public notice of the time, place, and subject matter of the meeting. So just like Mary was talking about earlier, we want to make sure that the public knows what we're talking about. And if we're going that we're starting to talk about something that's off topic, then we're not able to speak about that, and we put that on the agenda for a later time. These provisions of the Act are mandatory, which means they're in statute. However, they're liberally construed because they're always in favor of that transparency and open government. So there are a few building blocks, basics to open government, to
Ms.
the open meeting.
Ms. Escobar,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may interrupt for a moment.
Sure.
You have an amusing animation going on at the top of your screen. Is it possible?
Okay.
It's kind of distracting to me.
I don't have
Trying to
anything on.
take data on it. Okay. All right.
I don't have anything on my end. It might be my mouse. Is it still there?
Yes.
So the only thing I have is the top of my screen.
It's a little blurb saying customize your view by dragging one or more videos to the screen and then a button for got it.
I don't have that on my end.
Okay. All right.
I think if you hit got it, it'll go away.
If I do what now?
No, I
it's
think
for Dr. Borland.
for Dr. Borland, if you hit Dr. Borland, I think if you hit got it, it'll go away.
It did. It's magic. Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't know. Okay. My error. So sorry. Thank you.
No worries. Okay. So the purpose of the Open Meetings Act, like I said, is to ensure that transparency. So we're going to have those basic building blocks, and one of those building blocks is quorum. So in your board, you've got 9 members, and a quorum is going to be 5. You've got to have that majority of members in that advisory board to be able to take action. So you can have a meeting of less than that quorum of members, which is 50% plus 1. However, you can't take action unless you have that quorum present. The second part would be deliberation. So deliberation means you've got a discussion, verbal or written. So written is going to be key. We're going to talk about that later. It's an exchange between a quorum of that governmental body, either with each other or with each other and a member of the public. And then, of course, you've got the meeting itself. So a meeting, and it's used in quotes because it can be either a meeting like this. It's any time that that quorum is meeting to deliberate, discuss public business or policy that the governmental body has supervision or control over, or they're going to be taking action. So notice, this is a very vital component to open meetings. So what a notice is, it's going to provide that date, time, location, and subject of what's going to be covered in that meeting. So the way TDLR provides this is in the form of an agenda. We provide all of those items in the agenda, and we are required as a state agency to file that with the Texas Secretary of State's office at least 7 days prior to that public meeting. And we not only post it online on our website, but we also provide it to the Texas Secretary of State's office. And as I said earlier, if it's not on the agenda, we cannot discuss it. You will see that if it's something that we do want to discuss, then we'll put it on the next meeting's agenda. So you've got to keep in mind that a meeting that happens whenever you've gotten together and you've got a few members and you start talking about business of the board. So can you have board members that get together in some type of informal setting, or you're at a conference or a party without violating the Open Meetings Act? Of course, that's absolutely a possibility. So they're able to meet and engage and talk if you're talking about things incidental to the Open Meetings Act. However, you've got to be cautious in doing so. So some key things to remember is that if you're meeting outside of a properly noticed meeting, be thoughtful that if you've got a quorum of members present. So you don't want to engage in substantive conversations that you start going off into board business. Totally fine if you may have a quorum there, but you've got to be thoughtful that you're not going into board business. You don't want to have a walking quorum. So a walking quorum is when you have less than that quorum of members. You may have 2 members, 3 members, and they start talking about official business. And so those members communicate and have discussions with others, and that builds that walking quorum. So fewer than a quorum may start in that initial communication, but then they talk to others and you grow to a quorum. So for example, for a 5-member advisory board, you have a couple of members just talk by phone. And then they start emailing and they're talking about an upcoming rule change, for example. And then they start sharing information they have with each other. But then one of the members forwards that email to another. So that makes 3, and now you're hitting a quorum. They have just hit that walking quorum because now 3 of the members, which is a quorum of a 5-member board, have engaged in discussions on a matter that is subject to that governing body, that advisory board. So walking quorums can happen in multiple locations, right? Conference calls, video conference, in the hallway, at your office, at a conference. And now we have the beauty of technology, right? So they can happen by email, text. And now we have Twitter and Facebook and instant messaging, and those all can create issues with the Open Meetings Act. So to avoid a walking quorum, you want to avoid having meetings in small groups, talking about board business in those meetings, and communicating those to other members. So you don't want to be sending emails or group texts to those members, quorum of members, regarding that group business. And even if you do send an email, you want to send those individually so you can avoid those group responses. The next thing that we talk about is social media. So you may all be friends on Facebook, or you may have a group, a Facebook group where you talk about industry issues. And so things may come up, right? And you may have a question. Well, that post on Facebook can easily grow into a discussion that turns into an issue before the board. And so while it may have innocently been a question, you may have other members that start replying. And one of those replies may have just been an emoji or a like or something, but now you have a thread of multiple members that can easily turn into a walking quorum. So you need to be thoughtful of where you're posting and what you're posting about. So you need to ask, when you have that quorum of members, or even potentially, you may want to consider talking to them on an individual basis, because you want to also avoid polling your members. So you're asking each individually and trying to figure out who's going to vote how. So guidelines for open sessions. So the board or committee is limited to talking about specific items on the agenda, and Mary is fantastic about keeping us onto our agenda. So do not get offended if she's like, hey guys, we are going off of our trail, let's get back on. That is what we're required to do by law. So during that public comment period, members are only allowed to speak to their comment, and you all cannot reply. And it may be something that you're just like, wow, I have questions, I want to expand on that. That's fantastic. We will take that and we will add that to the next agenda. A member of the public or the board can raise that, and we will definitely add it to the future meetings. So to avoid violating the act based on insufficient notice, we always want to make sure that we add agendas in advance. You can always work with Mary, with Delia, and we can add those items in advance of that 7-day notice. We are always open to adding things to the agenda. Even if you think of it 2 months before the meeting, we will tag it and make sure we have it for the next agenda. If you think of it 2 weeks before the meeting, we will have it added and make note of it. So feel free to send it and we will make sure we have it on there. So what happens if you do violate the Open Meeting Act? Well, there's a couple of options. So there are civil remedies, which means somebody who feels that they have been harmed by the violation can bring a court action, and they can ask that that action be voided in court. So if they feel that the open meeting was not taken correctly, they would go and ask that for that action to be voided. However, they can also be criminal penalties against you as a member individually. If you were actively, knowingly participating in a walking quorum or in a meeting that was closed to the public, then you could be subject to misdemeanor criminal penalties, but also financial penalties. So bottom line is, don't engage in a quorum, don't engage in a walking quorum, and when you're in a meeting, follow Mary's lead and stick to the agenda. So we've got some tools for you, and those will be provided to you. So going next to the Administrative Procedures Act, what is this? Rulemaking. So the purpose of the Texas Administrative Procedures Act is to establish those minimum standards of uniform practice and also procedures for state agencies. And it's also to ensure that there's an active public participation and transparency during the rulemaking process, which is absolutely vital to what we do here at TDLR. So a rule is a statement by a state agency that interprets, implements, or prescribes law or policy, and then it also describes what we do as far as our practices or procedures here at TDLR or any state agency. So a rule could include either amendment or a repeal. It is not just a simple internal policy or practice management that only applies to TDLR. This is something that's general that applies to the public, the licensees. So where do we get our ideas for rulemaking? They are from legislative changes. We might be implementing something that passed during the recent legislative session. Our advisory board work groups may bring things to us. It may be during an advisory board discussion that you identify things. Our TDLR staff might identify rulemakings that we need, or during our 4-year rule review process, which I'll be talking about later, or through a rule petition. What is a rule petition? So any interested person can submit a petition to us with some identified language and say, we or I request that you adopt this rule. So an interested person is a Texas resident, business, governmental subdivision, or a public-private organization that is not a state agency, all located within Texas. So forgive me for kind of going through these really quickly. How does rulemaking work? So it all starts with that initial idea. The attorneys work with program to draft those rules, and the blue is where you come in. So we draft those rules and we bring them to the board for consideration and input. Once we get that, we send those out to the Texas Register, and that's where they're published for the world to see. They're out for public comment. From there, the public has 30 days to submit their comments to us. And we have a handy little web form, easy to get those comments. Once we get those comments, then the General Counsel's office, we start taking a look at those and say, okay, are these relevant to the rules? Is there something that substantively we may need to make a change to, or are they, just not related to the comments themselves? So we'll take a look. If we need to make any changes, then we'll do so. And then at that time, you guys come in, there's the blue, and we make recommendations to you on, you all decide, okay, we are good with these rules with the recommended changes, we're not. And from there, you all make the recommendations to our commission. The commission will take the rules to the commission. The commission will review those rules as you all have recommended. And from there, they will decide whether they want to adopt those rules. Once they've made that decision, then we file them back with the Texas Register as public notice, and then they'll be effective 20 days from that. So it's a bit of a lengthy process, but it gives the public many opportunities for engagement. So what is the rule review process? So every 4 years, all of our programs go through a rule review. So we file our notice of intent to review that program, and then we file that with the Texas Register. And the public has 30 days to say, great, this program should keep going, these rules are great, or here's what I think about the rules. We take all of those comments in, and we will make our recommendation to the commission to say, these rules should still exist, they still serve a purpose, please adopt them. We bring that to the commission, and they file and review. They file and they will adopt anything, those recommendations. So after that time, you'll notice there is no blue bubble for the advisory board. After that time, we'll bring any of those comments to you. We'll talk about rule review later. You'll notice there's an agenda item for an update on rule review for this program. Kind of speeding through this, there's a lot of stuff on the agenda. Public Information Act. So the Public Information Act is the final portion of this. This is also known as the Open Records Act. And so this is the state version, essentially, of FOIA. You may have heard of FOIA, which is the federal basically Federal Information Act. And so what this is basically guaranteeing that the public has the right to information within the state. So full transparency for the public. basically, if it's generated within the state, the public is probably going to have access to it. So it makes all documents, records, and information that is business open to the public with few exceptions. So anything that is electronic, created, transmitted, received, maintained on any device, so this includes cell phones, laptops, iPads within the state that's connected to official business is subject to public information. So what happens when we get an open records request, and we get thousands a year in our office our open records office works very hard to process them. Once we get it, they immediately begin processing and reviewing to see what it is, whether we can, where it needs to go to, and they begin processing to review the request. So they have 10 days from the date it's received to when the information needs to go out to that requester. So we can never ask someone why they want information. We can ask for a clarification. We may not understand what that request is or how to respond. So we're able to ask somebody for a clarification, but we can never ask somebody why they want their information. But we have 10 days to do it in. So there's a very quick response time from our staff. I mentioned exceptions earlier. There are very few exceptions, but there are exceptions. So some of those, of course, are date of birth, email, certain education documents, and there is, of course, HIPAA information that are accepted to disclosure. So that is a very, very high-level view of public information. Generally, you all will not have to, will not manage public information requests. If for some reason our staff was to get a public information request related to anything on the board, our staff would contact Delia and Mary and then get back in touch with you all. But if you have any questions, I am open to those at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Any questions from the board members?
Thank you all.
If not, thank you. Thank you very much. Moving to item D on the agenda, approval of minutes from the meeting February 26, 2021. That information, the minutes, draft minutes of that meeting were in the packet available prior to the meeting. I assume board members have reviewed it. So at this point, I guess we're open for any discussion or recommendations or a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Dr. Mock has made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Just Carol Sloan, I second that.
Carol Sloan, you're fast. So we have a motion and second to approve the minutes as drafted. All in favor, please indicate by raising your hand for the count.
Dr. Borland, may I do the roll call, please?
Okay, thank you. I've forgotten protocol.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you.
Mariel Fernandez,
Approve.
Dr. Joyce Mock,
Approve.
Carol Sloan,
Approve.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski, you're muted.
Approve. Sorry.
It's okay. Laurie Schneider,
Approve.
Brian Finley,
Approve.
and Dr. Gordon Borland, presiding officer.
Approve.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pardon me. So now we're to item E on the agenda, public comment. My understanding is that we have one person who informed the board that the department that they will be wishing to make comment. I believe it's Mr. Michael Moats. We thank you, Mr. Moats, for being here. Please say your name and who you represent. You will have 3 minutes. Please understand that the board members are not allowed to ask questions or engage in discussion with you about anything that is not specifically on our agenda. Please also understand that the that the staff will keep time. If needed, staff can follow up after the meeting. So please proceed, Mr. Moats.
Thank you. My name is Michael Moats. I'm here individually, and
I just want to let you guys know I'm a licensed behavior analyst in the states of Virginia, Iowa, Arizona, Vermont, and I'm registered in Florida. I also have a pending license, pending a background investigation in Nevada. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the states of Vermont and Florida. And finally, I'm a college professor who's been in the field of behavior analysis since 2015. I've worked in various settings, including center-based, home-based, school-based, community-based, and psychiatric hospital-based programs. I'm grateful that after a year, the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board meeting is finally taking place. There's a lot to address today. Today, the board will consider 2 alternatives to the BACB for licensure, and I implore the board to do so. There are many reasons why I'm not comfortable with the BACB, and I've made those clear to the department. But to be brief, the BACB has certified members on the staff and board of directors at the Judge Rotenberg Center that shocks children with autism. In the coming days, I'll introduce a rulemaking petition to ban both the practice of conversion therapy and shock therapy for maladaptive behaviors in the state of Texas. Some stats to consider: of the 176,000 people the BACB certifies, less than 1% are American Indian or Native Hawaiian. Less than 7% are Asian and less than 10% are Black. In addition, 85% of the 100,000 people are female. 78 practice autism or education. And as a board, you guys have made clear that you do not want the behavior analysis field to be focused on autism. I think that's important to consider. Also, the last 2 weeks ago today, there was a shooting at Robb Elementary School. I wrote a detailed article for the Denton Record Chronicle in which I covered that there were key issues and behavioral signs of mass shooters that could be identified by behavior analysts, and that these could be used to stop mass shooters in the future. Did you guys, and this is something else I wanted to share with you, based on the current laws and rules, someone from the FBI's Behavior Analysis Unit cannot practice in the state of Texas because they are not exempt from the state licensure requirements, and there is no process by which they can become licensed in Texas without an approval from the committee, the board. I'm interested in forensic and clinical analysis side, and so I've done a lot of research on this area. There is currently no other reason to block the other boards that are being considered. It gives parents the opportunities to choose. It allows for competition. And as the BACB pulls out of the international market, it will allow other individuals like military spouses or those who work for the State Department in places like Okinawa, Japan, to continue to practice applied behavior analysis.
Time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Moats. Appreciate your input. We'll take it under advisement. The next item on the agenda is item F, staff reports. We'll have briefings from the staff and discussion of their reports. First is the licensing division. I believe Laura Hernandez will be presenting that report.
Good morning, Dr. Borland and board members. My name is Laura Hernandez. I'm the licensing manager for the tools team here in the licensing department. I submitted my staff report. We have a personnel update. We did have Gabby Machado resign from her position, and we are interviewing so that we can get a replacement. Other than that, there's statistics for the fiscal year 2021 and the first 2 quarters for 2022. You can see that most the applications are online, new applications and renewals are online. And underneath that is the emails that we receive, web contacts and emails that we receive for behavior analyst. And those are the numbers. We are trying to develop a way to capture those numbers. Right now, it's still manually by flagging the different emails that come in for the different programs. But we are trying to develop where it can be automated and we're not having to manually update those contacts. And that's why there's only for the years, for the months for this current fiscal year. And if you have any questions regarding any of the statistics or reporting numbers, please, I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Pardon me, questions or comments from the board?
Got a question.
Yes, please.
Why why do you think that?
Excuse me, please state your name.
Sokolowski? Yeah, Stephanie Sokolowski. Why do you think the volume of contacts for April was pretty significantly higher than the other months?
I don't really know. We received the main emails that we receive for behaviors are verification requests. So I'm not sure if it's because they're going to school or they're transferring, and that's the time of the year that they're doing that. But those are the main questions that we receive through web contacts or verifications that they're licensed to be sent to other states.
Right. Thank you.
This is Dr. Gordon Borland again. So it looks like that by and large, almost all the contacts now are coming in through email. I remember when we first started, there were quite a few phone calls. So this probably facilitates expedited review. I'm guessing, is that advantageous?
Yes, it is. Those web contacts come directly to the licensing team, so they don't have to wait for either a phone call to be returned or somebody that maybe is not as familiar with the licensing system. So my team is able to get those right away and respond.
That's great news. Another question, I'm just curious, do you have a sense of what percentage of people or licensees, when their license is up for renewal, actually renew? I guess I'm kind of wondering about, is there attrition? I know sometimes people move out of state, but just your general sense of that would be interesting.
Yeah, we don't really have a tracking method to see how many renew on time or how many renew late because we get everything's done online. So we rarely see any renewals or applications because it's all automated and those go out so quickly. And then they have up to 18 months to renew the license. So even if it expires, they could still renew late and have that time period to continue to renew.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? If not, we'll move on to the Customer Service Division report. I believe Don Robinson will be providing that information.
Yes, good morning, Advisory Board members and TDLR staff. My name is Dawn Robinson. I'm one of the managers here in customer service. And as you can see, these stats for fiscal year 2021 and 2022 are on the screen. As far as emails, it's already been stated that licensing receives the emails that go directly to them, but sometimes in customer service, we get a few one-offs. So fiscal year 2021, we only received 9, and then fiscal year 2022, we only received 1. And again, that's due to that the emails that go directly to the licensing team. Some email that come to us that are one-off that we do receive, we will answer those, or if we can't, we'll forward them on to licensing. Also, our phone calls, our fiscal year 2021 was 476 in phone calls, and they're down. Fiscal year 2022, they're down to 335 phone calls. If you have any questions, I'm here to assist. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Appreciate the presentation of data. As behavior analysts, we always like to see graphs and data.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next report is from the Enforcement Division. I believe Christopher Funderburg will be providing that report.
Yes, thank you. Chairman and board members, my name is Chris Funderburg. I'll be presenting enforcement's report to you today. We begin with personnel updates. I won't read the entire list, and instead I'd ask you to please review it at your leisure. I think it's important to note that each individual earned their new position by virtue of their merit, and all of them have made our division stronger. There is one item I'd like to highlight. After 30 years of state service, Karen Cox has retired. She was one of our senior prosecutors and the medical professions team lead. You may remember that she was enforcement's representative at the January 29th, 2020 meeting. Karen hasn't been gone long, but she is already greatly missed. Unfortunately, I don't expect her to return to the department anytime soon, and she's affirmed that retirement is a concept that she's, quote, a really big fan of. The second section of our report is a review of statistics distilled from data generated during enforcement's case resolution process. You'll note it includes additional data this board requested at its last meeting, specifically data about pending cases under review, length of time to case resolution, ethics codes violation, and violation types in cases. My discussion is going to kind of jump between the pages just to kind of keep a coherent flow of it. And so if there's a specific section that I think I should draw your attention to, I'll bring that specifically to your attention. So we've also attempted to provide a broader perspective of our efforts by including statistics generated during the entirety of fiscal year 2021. But since this board reviewed that 2021 data at its last meeting, my comments focus on fiscal year 2022. So during fiscal year 2022, enforcement received a total of 36 behavioral analysis complaints. 5 complaints were requests to review criminal history reviews that were filed by the department, and 31 were filed by consumers. This division between the types of cases is illustrated by the pie chart found in the sources of case opened section on the bottom of the second page. One of the 5 criminal history cases was open for investigation. The other 4 are pending review. 21 of 31 consumer complaints were opened as cases and investigated. The other 10 are still pending review. Additionally, 5 consumer complaints were received in fiscal year 2021, but were not opened until fiscal year 2022. Thus, all 26 of those consumer cases allege ethics violations. Thus, we have 1 criminal complaint and a total of 26 consumer complaints. We have a total of 27 complaints opened for investigation in fiscal year 2022. Now, as we started fiscal year 2022 with 28 pending cases, fiscal year 2022 has actually seen 54 active cases. The median median age of the 16 cases that were currently open in March of 2022 is 168.5 days. The oldest has been open for 244 days, and the newest for 37 days. Now, going back, we have, just to recap, we have 27 complaints open for investigation in fiscal year 22. We had 28 left over, so we have a total of 53 live. We've closed 38 of the 53. The reasons for the closure are delineated under the case outcome and BHC cases closed and reasons sections, which I'll discuss now. First, 35 of the 38 cases were closed as informally resolved. Now, this is a term that's inclusive of multiple subcategories as follows. 32 cases were closed after the prosecutor found the available evidence insufficient to prove any violation. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, then this is delineated on the page currently on screen. 38 cases were closed. It says 1 case was closed after the issuance of a warning letter. One was closed after the complainant withdrew their complaint. And the final case was reviewed by our criminal history team to determine if the applicant's criminal record would require the department to deny licensure. So that's 35 cases informally resolved. Next, 2 of the 38 total cases were resolved by an agreed order derived from a settlement negotiated by the respondent and department. We'll discuss those cases later. Finally, the 38th case was a criminal history case resolved after the respondent's license was revoked by operation of law. We'll talk about that case later as well. Now, the next 2 sections of our report compare the number of violations alleged, and this is at, yes, thank you. This is at the pages being displayed now. The next 2 sections compare the number of violations alleged when the case is opened and the number of disciplinaries that actually resulted from those allegations. The drop-off between the 2 vividly demonstrates the difference between alleging a violation and proving it. As of March fiscal year 2022, we have 24 cases open, and this is a reduction of more than 70%, which is a pretty good average in overall. Now, compared to now, if you could please turn back to page, page 2 of 6. I just wanted to draw your attention to the percentage of cases closed, resolved within 6 months. Now, compared to TDLR as a whole, the average time to close a behavioral analysis case is about 60 days greater than average. I can only offer an educated guess as to why, but I suspect the cause is that complaints against behavioral analysis frequently allege standard of care violations. These are complicated cases, and I'll go into a little bit more detail during enforcement's expert witness presentation in a few minutes. But briefly, these allegations require an expert's review, and our behavior analyst expert wasn't retained until December of 2021. Her retention allowed 5 of our oldest cases to be resolved, and the advanced age of these cases at closing meant a corresponding increase in the time to resolution statistic. Finally, the percentage of cases resolved within 6 months and of cases resulted in disciplinary action are both in line with TDLR's regulatory efforts generally. Now, I hope these statistics help illuminate enforcement's role within TDLR, but there's just one last section to go, a summary of contested cases that ended in disciplinary action. While there's only 3 such cases, I hope they can provide some insight into enforcement's regulatory focus and methods. The first respondent, Corey Burgess, we entered an agreement where he accepted liability for 1 count of failing to keep accurate records. This is a Class B violation. We fined him at we assessed a penalty of $1,000, which he has paid in full. The second case against respondent David Fowler, again, same violation. This time we asked for a slightly higher penalty as there was more indicia of intent in his failure to keep accurate records. Finally, the Michael J. Leslie, this respondent had his license revoked by operation of law. This is because he had a behavioral analysis is required to keep current certification as a board certified behavioral analyst by the board behavior analyst certification board. Now, if that certification is revoked, they're ineligible for licensure. And on October 20th, 2020, the BACB revoked his license. Thus, on January 12th, when we found out about it, January 12th, 2022, we sent him a letter that said his license has been revoked by operation of law, and there was and it was extinguished actually as of October 20th, 2022. Excuse me, October 20th, 2020. That's the entirety of our report. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Funderburg. Questions or comments by from the board?
This is Mariel Fernandez. I have a question. Could you explain, I guess, what the process looks like from the time somebody submits a complaint with evidence to the time that complaint is resolved? What are the steps that are gone through?
So I mean, you know, I can speak generally, and there are always exceptions, but generally, the complaint is received by our intake division. The intake division is trained to assess cases to see whether we can proceed on them at all. And mainly their role is to gather sufficient evidence for us to justify, spending resources on the further prosecution of the allegations that they're making. If the complaint is anonymous and we need additional information in order to proceed with the case, and we either have no one to contact, or we have someone to contact and they don't send us back the information that we need, the case is closed there. Also, sometimes complaints will allege something outside of our jurisdiction to regulate, a dispute about prices, for example. This is not something that the legislature has granted us the authority to it's not within our regulatory jurisdiction. And so intake has been trained not to open these cases. Though I can say this, intake errs on the side of opening complaints. Like, if they have questions, they either come to us, as the prosecutors, to make sure that these cases, to see if these cases need to be opened, or they just opened it. The next step is after the case is opened, it's sent to an investigator. The investigator develops the case, generates an investigatory report. The investigatory report and any evidence found by that investigator are sent to the prosecutor for review, and then the prosecutor makes a decision on how to proceed with it. And that's pretty much the entirety of the process. Right? Unless you want me to go into more detail about what the prosecutor can do.
No, that's good. I'm wondering why, when ample evidence is provided by the person making the complaint,
Right.
I'm just wondering why it's taking 200 to 300 days to resolve the issue. That's all.
And I think it's not only are you interested in the answer to that, so is the legislature. So I mean, this is something that the age of cases is of paramount importance to the department. again, I going back to what I was saying in my report, my assumption is that this statistic is higher than average simply because of the nature of the allegations that are being made in these complaints. They are standard of care violations, well, ethics violations are standard of care violations, and we have no one on staff with the sufficient training in order that get to assess the viability of these allegations. And so we have to send them to an expert. We haven't had an expert on board retained until December of last year. Since she's great, she's been really diligent in her reviews, thorough. But she's enabled us to get rid of some of our oldest cases, but we're still working through that backlog. That said, I believe we only have 16 live cases at this point, and all of with the oldest, not even, and this was in March, and I think so. I think the number's even gone down. The oldest was 244 days. So I think trends are in the right direction, but does that answer your question? Like, I think there is an explanation as to why that number is elevated, and I hope that by the next time we meet, that reality will be reflected in the statistics.
It does. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments, observations by the board members?
Brian Findlay.
Brian, please.
Mr. Funderburg, with the cases that have been open the longest, that are the oldest, just for my own curiosity, is there a maximum amount of time or a cap on how long an investigation could remain open, or is just open until resolution?
I don't want to speak out of turn because while I'm on the prosecution side, we have our own guidelines for case age. I can't speak to the investigatory end of it. I do know that each step of this process, there is definite incentives placed on getting it to the next step. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to find that answer out for you and get it to you, because I can't speak with certainty on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from the board? Well, I have one.
Sure.
First of all, Mr. Vindenberg, let me thank you. First, thank you for this more extended provision of data and information. Appreciate the staff sensitivity to that request at previous meetings. So thank you very much for that. I know a little more effort had to be expended on you guys' part in terms of preparing this report. So as people who deal with data a lot know that takes time, we recognize that and greatly appreciate it.
And that's all Griselda and Kim are statistics people. They do a great job. But anyway, please continue.
Thank you. And so we are very appreciative. So I wanted to go back to something that I think I understood was being said in response to Ms. Fernandez's question, which is a lot of the delay in processing some of the cases has been due to the department not having ready access to an expert, a person with expertise in behavior analysis. When I guess I want to plumb for a moment what you mean what is meant when you say an expert. I assume that means an expert in behavior analysis or in the ethical practices of behavior analysis. So if you could kind of remove any
Dr.
ambiguity.
Borland,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Borland, Mary Winston, I'm going to move this report along because we have Chris coming up in a little bit to talk about expert witnesses, that whole process as a specific agenda item. So if we could release poor Chris off of this, I'm just kidding, Chris, I know you got it, but give him a chance to then expand on the expert witness, what it is, that whole presentation, it would be wonderful. And we can get everyone else done right here.
Thank you. So to go back to my question, so is it a correct understanding, Mr. Funderburg, that much of the delay in processing some of the cases is just the absence of that expert witness, which you will expand upon in a few minutes?
There are known, known knowns and known unknowns. There are some known unknowns. But based on my dealings with these cases, I'm almost certain that the logjam was the lack of expert witnesses, because they simply cannot proceed without input from at a minimum behavioral analysis licensee.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Funderburg at this point? If not, let's move forward to the report from the regulatory program management. I believe Katie Bryce was originally going to present this. I don't know if she's able to do so or not. So whomever it is, please proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Borland. Good morning, advisory board members. This is Katie Bryce with Regulatory Program Management, the Medical and Health Professions section. I'm going to do my best to get through this without my voice cracking. So under current projects on the report, you'll see that staff facilitated 4 behavior analyst licensing work group meetings along with our licensing team manager, Laura Hernandez, beginning in January 2022. We have begun work on the 4-year rule review for the behavior analyst program, which we'll talk about, I believe, under a different agenda item later. Staff is completing work on bill implementation projects from the 87th legislative session. We have collaborated with our information technology team to have the license issuance and expiration dates available on the public license search. This came up because people from Medicaid were needing to have that information publicly available instead of having to go through open records requests to be able to enroll people. And the TDLR Health Occupations Annual Report was submitted to the chairs of the House Licensing and Administrative Procedures Committee, House Public Health Committee, Senate Business and Commerce Committee, and Senate Health and Human Services Committee on February 1st. The report is statutorily required and contains programmatic license and complaint data. It was emailed to advisory board members in February and is also available on our webpage. Another thing we have been doing is working on to develop data-driven analytics for programs, and risk-based modeling has been a focus within RPM. Under outreach, we were very happy to be able to attend the Texas Association of Behavior Analysts Conference in Dallas in April. We sat in on some sessions and also had a booth. And additionally, the latest edition of our newsletter, the Health Monitor, was published in March. Our next newsletter should be coming out at the end of June or early July. And now I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bryce. Any questions or comments from the board members?
Okay, thank you.
Hearing none, thank you. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the report from the Executive Office, presented by Mary Winston.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to present for the Executive Office. Personnel updates. I think we actually had updated everyone last time on the changes, but if not, and we do have new members, we did have a recent change, and actually that change took effect at the beginning of this year when our longtime deputy and the executive director for a time period, a couple of years, but Brian Francis had been with this agency since the late 90s. He did take a retirement and we wished him well. Mike Aris Mendez, our former chair of the board, who then went from that side of the aisle to our side of the aisle to become a deputy executive director, accepted the position of executive director. To round out that division, we have Christina Kaiser, Senior Deputy Executive Director. Christina led our enforcement division, I believe, for over 20 years. David Gonzalez, part of our RPM staff, who's been at, I always remember how long David's been here because he's been here as long as I've been married. So it's 25 years that he's been with the staff. And so now he's our deputy, as well as we have a chief of staff, Mr. Hemant Macon. We secured Hemant when we were gifted the podiatry program from the legislature. Hemant was their long-term executive director. He now is the chief of staff here at TDLR. So we've been rocking and rolling as always. Item B says sunset and bill implementation update. Katie just talked about bill implementation and how it's moving forward from the 87th, because coming up is going to be the 88th, and that's going to be at the top of the year. So we're plugging right along. Sunset review, that's all been on our website. We were continued for 12 years, and Christina Kaiser, our Senior Deputy Executive Director, kind of led that charge. I say led that charge because she implemented something new, which I love processes, you know. SOP is my middle name, which some people hate, but it kind of just helps eliminate the guesswork, and it leaves everyone, all the accountabilities on the table. So Christina implemented these monthly reports. So one thing we learned from Sunset is they came here and they said, show us everything. And we did. And we learned then that we need to have all this data in one place. It makes it so much simpler to reach, to put our hands on, and to answer questions. And that's what Christina has created teams to do. And so we all have, any one of us charged with bill implementation, have a report that's submitted monthly of updates, and we make sure we get to that finish line. So, board, where are we now? We've just submitted our strategic plan. It's kind of a moving forward just thing. We have our session, legislative session, and that's going to come up. Then we have our strategic plan, then it's bill implementation after, and I've mixed them up because once we get the bills implemented, or the bills that are decided in the session, it's the implementation. And as soon as that happens, we begin to be what we're in now, which is strategic planning. That strategic planning report is on our website. Just take a peek. It's available for your review, submitted on June 1st. So the last bit I want to talk about is just this unscientific, but this helpful for our IT staff, our social media staff, for our webmaster, Mr. Fickle. Just how are we reaching, or how is the public able to reach us? How many views are we getting? We do sort of an inside analysis of the questions that we get, just monitoring the way we have to reach out today. And this was even pre-COVID, because the world is just gonna reach out on the internet. I'm working with my kids, they're typing on the computers, and I'm like, well, talking about brainstorming exercises. My brainstorming exercises when I was in college was scribble on a page. Now it's typing on the computer. So this is how we reach out. 65% of those visitors to your page on our website accessed it from a desktop computer. This changes a bit. Some of our professions that we regulate operate on the go, and they'll access the website on a mobile phone. We have that 1% of the tablet that's holding on, and the reasons that they're reaching out to us are questions like how to apply for a behavior analyst license. They want to review our frequently asked questions. They want to know how to renew a license. They want a little refresher on our laws and rules. And of course, they're seeking our forms. This means that about 118 folks view the site a day looking for these questions. And over the past 6 months, that wrapped up at the end of May, that was over 21,000 views. If you have any questions, let me know. That is our executive report for the day.
Thank you very much, Ms. Winston. It's always nice to see all that information. Thank you so much. And I'm glad to hear that Sunset seems to, the department moves ahead for the next 12 years. So that's good. Always appreciate the efficiency with which staff do these things. It's just, compared to some of my colleagues in other states, it's so easy to deal with these issues here in Texas. So comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, again, we thank you and all the staff. We know that you're just representing a lot of people who have made all these things happen and keep it happening so efficiently and effectively day in and day out, COVID or not. So thank you. Moving to item G on the agenda, a presentation. It's the return of Christopher Funderburg, a sequel. Mr. Funderburg will be providing a presentation on the process of becoming an expert witness. Again, to remind, this is a presentation. This is not an item of discussion. This is for information. So please inform us, Mr. Funderburg.
I'll do my best. You've asked for additional information about the expert witness process. As Karen Cox explained how TDLR retains subject matter experts at your January 2020 meeting, this presentation is still going to focus on the use of experts prior to litigation and what an expert might affect it if they testify at a hearing. So this is more of a kind of a generalized explanation of expert witnesses rather than a specific application to this profession. The designation and conduct of expert witnesses is governed by the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and the Texas Rules of Evidence. These bodies of law allow parties to designate expert witnesses to either use their expertise to help the designated attorney understand complicated or technical aspects of a case, and also to provide a court with a learned opinion to consider during its deliberation process. This unique rule is best illustrated when experts are compared to non-experts or lay witnesses. If a lay witness has personal knowledge about a matter relevant to a lawsuit, then they can testify about that matter, and that's it. These limits are imposed with the intent to reduce their testimony to an objective recital of their personal knowledge, similar to a footage created by a security camera or a phone call recorded by a tape machine. In fact, if a lay witness does have an opinion about a disputed fact, and that opinion is anything more than a common sense deduction derived from their own testimony, like, I saw him drink 12 beers in an hour, he had to be drunk, then that opinion is presumptively inadmissible as evidence. But if a witness qualifies as an expert, then both her opinion about a matter in dispute is admissible, and so is her testimony about the evidence that formed the basis of her opinion. And unlike lay witnesses, her testimony isn't limited to matters she personally witnessed. Instead, both her testimony and opinion on a disputed matter can be based on any facts and data that the expert reviewed, in addition to facts and data that the expert has been made aware of. Compared to lay witnesses, experts enjoy a significant expansion of admissible testimony, one that grants qualified experts an ability to shape and form their opinion based on data from a wide variety of sources. For example, an expert may base their opinion as well as testify about investigatory reports, government records, relevant news articles, or other objective documentations with relevant data. She can support her opinions with ideas and analysis from recognized authorities, like a profession's code of conduct, peer-reviewed journals, scholarly articles, etc. Then, after testimony that explains the underlying facts, data, and analysis that formed her opinion, the expert can offer her opinion to the court. That opinion and its underlying data are now potentially admissible evidence the court may consider while it decides what is invariably a case's most disputed fact. This allowance granted expert does have a cost. At trial, the validity and credibility of the expert's qualifications, the reliability of any data that she used, disputes about the methodology she follows, or how she applied this methodology to form her opinion, all this and more are proper subjects for cross-examination by a party highly vested in ensuring the expert's opinion stays out of the record. This battle is what we keep in mind when we review the extensive questionnaire submitted by each applicant for retention as expert. The more indications of that the expert's qualifications are robust, that her analytical ability is well developed, and the strength of her tendency to rely on accepted authority, the greater our chances of winning this duel of experts, and with that win, almost certain victory at trial. So all this talk, and we arrived at what is rather anticlimactic correction of expectations. Most of our experts never see the inside of a courtroom. We rarely need experts to testify. Instead, their primary benefit is in the role of consultant to the prosecutor. The expert's training, education, experience allows them to identify violations and gauge their liability, then explain their conclusions to the prosecutor so that he or she knows how to proceed. All of this occurs before any pleading is filed, and our need for consulting experts is constant. This need arises from the reality that the department's regulatory authority rarely allows us to take unilateral action. Instead, enforcement acts by opening cases in response to complaints filed by a variety of sources, most of them consumers. These complaints frequently include allegations whose validity or accuracy is less than certain. In those instances, it's in our best interest to assess the allegation's legal sufficiency before we commit more resources to prosecuting the complaint. And if the violation alleges a breach of a profession's standard of care, the proper appraisal requires consulting an expert in that profession. So in conclusion, consulting experts' involvement in enforcement action creates a ready path to its resolution, and without their involvement, a case does nothing but age. So at this time, I'd like to break the fourth wall and extend an offer to any behavioral analysis who might be watching. If you're licensed as a behavior analyst in Texas and think you might be interested in working with the department, and to be clear, you will be paid except for board members who are cruelly excluded, please visit TDLR's behavioral analysis section on TDLR.com and go to the forms section. There you will find a link named Expert Witness Declaration. Complete this declaration of interest and we'll be in contact directly. That concludes my presentation. I hope it provides this board with some benefit as you continue to assist the department's effort to fairly and equitably regulate the behavioral analysis profession.
Thank you very much, Mr. Funderburg. Was helpful. I feel less ignorant than I was when we started the meeting, so thank you.
What else can I ask for?
Appreciate you breaking the fourth wall. Given that this was for presentation, we'll move forward to the next item on the agenda, item H, work group reports. Ms. Sloan will be providing a report for the licensing work group. Please proceed, Ms. Sloan.
All right. I am going to present the rather lengthy licensing work group report. The members participating in the work group meetings were Dr. Borland, Dr. Mock, Dr. Sokolowski, and me. The Behavior Analyst Advisory Board met on February 26, 2021, and assigned review of the Qualified Behavior Analyst QBA credential issued by the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, QABA, and the Behavior Intervention Certification Council, BICC, Board Certified Autism Professional, that's a BCAP, credential to the licensing work group. Additionally, Mrs. Holly Benicosa, Executive Director of QABA, provided updated reference documents regarding the Qualified Autism Service Practitioner Supervisor, the QASP-S credential, and asked the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board to reconsider recommending approval of the QASP-S credential as acceptable for an Assistant Behavior Analyst license. The licensing work group met on January 26th, March 2nd, March 23rd, and April 27th, 2022, to review these credentials. Texas Occupations Code Chapter 506 defines certifying entity as the Nationally Accredited Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or another entity accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies or the American National Standards Institute to issue credentials in the professional practice of applied behavior analysis and approved by the department. Statute further defines a licensed behavior analyst as a person who is certified by the certifying entity as a board certified behavior analyst, or who has an equivalent certification issued by the certifying entity and who meets the requirements specified by Section 506.253. Section 506.253 requirements for licensed behavior analysts include meeting the educational and examination requirements of the board certified behavior analyst standard or an equivalent standard adopted by the certifying entity. For the sake of comparing credentials, BCBA pathways 1 and 2 were used, as these are the two certification pathways requiring a master's degree other than being a faculty member. The work group reviewed several requirements for BCAP certification, including education requirements, pre-certification fieldwork experience requirements, and examination requirements. The work group found the BCAP credential to be the non-equivalent to the BCBA credential in several key areas, including the following. BCAP requires a master's degree but does not specify that the degree must be in a field related to behavior analysis. BCBA requires a master's degree with behavior analytic coursework from an Association for Behavior Analysis International accredited or recognized behavior analysis degree program or a verified course sequence. BCAP requires 285 coursework hours with 45 hours in autism or developmental disabilities, leaving only 240 hours in other areas of applied behavior analysis. BCBA requires 315 coursework hours in applied behavior analysis. BCAP requires 1,000 hours of supervised experience providing evidence-based autism treatment service. BCBA requires 2,000 hours of supervised field work under 5% supervision or 1,500 hours of supervised field work under 10% supervision. BCAP examination has 150 scored questions, with 7 to 9% being autism specific. BCBA exam has 175 scored questions. BCAP scope is focused on treating the deficits and behaviors associated with autism spectrum disorder. The work group reviewed several requirements for QBA certification, including education requirements, pre-certification fieldwork experience requirements, and examination requirements. The work group found the QBA credential to be non-equivalent to the BCBA credential in several key areas, including the following. QBA requires 250 coursework hours in applied behavior analysis, plus 20 hours in autism disorders, while BCBA requires 315 hours. QBA does not require any hours in the philosophical underpinnings of applied behavior analysis, which is considered fundamental knowledge in the field of applied behavior analysis, although requiring coursework in principles of behavior analysis, while the BCBA certification requires 90 hours in philosophical underpinnings, concepts, and principles. QBA allows coursework provided by their third-party approved course providers, while BCBA requires all courses to be taken in a verified course sequence or from an ABAI accredited university. As of 2023, all verified course courses must be graduate level courses with a grade of C or higher to be acceptable. QBA requires 1,500 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 5% supervision. BCBA requires either 2,000 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 5% supervision or 1,500 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 10% supervision. QBA allows supervision to be spread out over a 3-month period, meaning there could be long periods between supervision, and there's no mention of a limit on group size for group supervision. BCBA limits supervision segments to 1-month durations and specifies a maximum group size of 10 people. The qualifications of approved supervisors for QBA are vague. In parentheses, an individual who is licensed or certified in another health profession, including behavior analysis, or who is practicing within the scope of the competency of their license/certificate, and do not imply that the supervisor has sufficient training or knowledge in applied behavior analysis compared to the specification that the supervisor have documented expertise in behavior analysis, such as ACB certification, or by a licensed or registered psychologist who is certified by the American Board of Professional Psychology in behavioral and cognitive psychology with testing in ABA, or else a verified course sequence instructor. The field in which the supervisor is licensed, including behavior analysis in its scope and practice, in itself is not sufficient for a supervisor under BACB requirements, but apparently is sufficient for QBA requirements. QBA does not require any direct client contact during the pre-certification supervised fieldwork, but the BACB requires that direct client contact with clients occur, although limiting the percentage of supervised experience that can involve direct client contact. QBA examination consists of 100 scored questions, and autism focused questions account for 5% of exam questions, and no questions identified on the philosophical underpinnings of applied behavior analysis. BCBA exam consists of 175 scored questions, including items pertaining to the philosophical underpinnings of behavior analysis. Texas Occupations Code Chapter 506 defines certifying entity as the Nationally Accredited Behavior Analyst Certification Board, the BACB, or another entity that is accredited by the National Commission for Certifying Agencies or the American National Standards Institute to issue credentials in the professional practice of applied behavior analysis and approved by the department. Statute further defines a licensed assistant behavior analyst as a person who is certified by the certifying entity as a board certified assistant behavior analyst, or who has an equivalent certification issued by the certifying entity and who meets the requirements specified by Section 506.254. Section 506.254, requirements for licensed assistant behavior analyst, include meeting the educational and examination requirements of the board certified assistant behavior analyst or standard, or an equivalent standard adopted by the certifying entity. The work group reviewed several requirements for QASP-S certification, including education requirements, pre-certification fieldwork experience requirements, and examination requirements. The work group found the QASP-S credential to be non-equivalent to the BCABA credential in several key areas, including the following. QASP-S requires 173 coursework hours in applied behavior analysis, while BCABA requires 225 hours. QASP-S does not require any hours in the philosophical underpinnings of applied behavior analysis, which is considered fundamental knowledge in the field of applied behavior analysis, although requiring coursework in principles of behavior analysis, while the BCABA certification requires 45 hours in this area. QASP-S allows coursework provided by their third-party approved course providers, while BCABA requires all courses be taken in a verified course sequence or from an ABAI accredited university. As of 2023, all VCS courses must be university-level courses with a grade of C or higher to be acceptable. QASP-S requires 1,000 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 5% supervision. BCABA requires either 1,300 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 5% supervision or 1,000 hours of pre-certification supervised fieldwork with 10% supervision. QASP-S also allows supervision to be spread out over a 3-month period, meaning there could be long periods between supervision, and there's no mention of a limit on group size for group supervision, while the BCACB requires supervision to occur monthly and specifies a maximum group of 10 people. QASP-S does not have a specific requirement for direct contact during the pre-certification supervised fieldwork, but the BACB requires that the direct contact with clients occur, although limiting the percentage of supervised experience that can involve direct client contact. The qualifications of approved supervisors for QASP-S are vague. That is, an individual who is licensed or certified in another health profession, including behavior analysis, who is practicing within the scope of the competency of their license/certificate. And they do not imply that the supervisor has sufficient training or knowledge in applied behavior analysis, compared to the specification that the supervisor have documented experience in behavior analysis, such as BACB certification, or by a licensed or registered psychologist who is certified by the American Board of Professional Psychology in Behavioral and Cognitive Psychology with testing in ABA. Not the field in which the supervisor is licensed include behavior analysis in its scope of practice, or else a verified course sequence instructor. The field in which the supervisor is licensed, including behavior analysis in its scope and practice in itself, is not sufficient for a supervisor under BACB requirements, but apparently is sufficient for QBA requirements. QASP-S examination consists of 100 scored questions, and autism-focused questions account for 5% of exam questions, and no questions identified on the philosophical underpinnings of applied behavior analysis. BCABA exam consists of 150 scored questions, including items pertaining to the philosophical underpinnings of behavior analysis. The licensing work group initially reviewed the QASP-S credential on September 29, 2020, and the advisory board discussed the licensing work group's recommendation during their November 4, 2020 meeting. At that time, the advisory board did not recommend approving the QASP-S credential as meeting the requirement for an assistant behavior analyst license. Upon further recent review, the licensing work group does not recommend approval of the QASP-S credential for an assistant behavior analyst license or approving QABA as a certifying entity for the Texas Assistant Behavior Analyst license. The licensing work group does not recommend approval of the qualified behavior analyst credential or the board certified autism professional credential as meeting the requirements of the behavior analyst license. These credentials were not considered equivalent by the licensing work group, including the reasons listed above. Additionally, the licensing work group does not recommend recognizing the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, QABA, or the Behavior Intervention Certification Council, BICC, as certifying entities for applied behavior analysis.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sloan. You may need to catch your breath. Thank you for presenting that extensive and detailed report. Appreciate the activity, the time invested by the work group on that. Questions or comments related to the report? We will shortly get to specific recommendations and actions for each of these three credentials, but specific to the work group report, any questions or comments? I had an observation to make, and the members of the work group can tell me if this is correct. With respect to item bullet point number 4, with respect to the BACP certification, bullet point number 8 on the QASP-S comments, and bullet point number 8 of the QBA recommendations. The point is made about the number of scored questions on the BACB administered exam. My recollection is all those scored questions all pertain to behavior analysis. Is that a correct recollection? Dr. Sokolowski, I believe you're commenting, but you're muted, please, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm just thinking aloud on the BACB, they would be all related to behavior analysis.
Thank you, Dr. Sokolowski. That was my recollection of having reviewed those. I just wanted to be clear because some of the other credentials have a variety of questions, some of which, majority of which pertain to behavior analysis, but not all.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any further comments or questions regarding this before we move on to the next item on the agenda? Hearing no comments or questions, moving to item I on the agenda, discussion and possible recommendations regarding recognizing the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysts Credentialing Board as a department-approved certifying entity and accepting the Qualified Autism Service Practitioner Supervisor, or QASP-S, certification for a Texas Assistant Behavior Analyst license. So open the floor to the virtual floor to comments, questions, discussion regarding this issue before we move to a motion. Don't be shy.
I will comment.
Excuse me, please identify yourself, Dr.
Stephanie Sokolowski.
Thank
I
you.
will comment, Ms. Sloan, that report was very clear. I realize that Katie probably is the one that framed that report. We discussed at length the similarities and comparisons, and I think the report is very clear about the differences. So that is my opinion, that the report really laid it out very clearly about what we found were the differences that matter. So thank you, Ms. Sloan, for reading that lengthy report. And I think the report says is very clear.
Thank you, Dr. Sokolowski. Other comments or questions or observations related to the issue before us about whether to recommend recognition of the QAS QABA as a board department approved certifying entity and approving and accepting the QASP-S certificate as sufficient for basis for Texas Assistant Behavior Analyst license. Other comments or questions?
Brian Finlay.
Yes. Brian, please go ahead. And then we'll catch Dr. Mock. Thank you.
I just want to voice my support for the conclusions of the work group and that, and to also inquire if any of these other groups, the BICC or QABA, if they were to take public feedback and adjust their testing measures and supervision requirement, we anticipate that that would have a negative impact on the approving them as a certification body?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Finley. Maybe something that TDLR staff could address, but of course, at any point, that people can make a request for consideration. I believe, Ms. Winston, were you about to comment?
Oh, I was.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, I think at this point of the agenda, and I too want to thank Ms. Sloan. That was a mouthful, and it was very dedicated. It showed all the work put in, and I just want to keep us on track with Robert's rules, this is the discussion part, and thank you for the board supporting this work group. And once we've gotten through this, and Mr. Finley, the feelings of whatever goes on outside, we will of course mitigate that, handle that, work with that. But where we are now is discussion and that recommendation. So once we've done our discussion, then Dr. Borland will ask for recommendation for a motion, and we'll move forward because we have one more to do.
Actually, two more. Yeah.
Two more, sorry.
Thank you. Dr. Mock, I believe you were, oh, I'm sorry, just a moment, Katie, Ms. Bryce, please.
This is Katie Bryce with Regulatory Program Management, and I just wanted to say that if any of these credentials did have significant updates or changes, you know, the advisory board is always welcome to review them again at the request of the entity that issues the credentials. You know, that's always something that we can look at in the future again.
Thank you, Ms. Bryce. Dr. Mock?
I was just wondering if we were ready to make a motion to accept the recommendations of the work group.
So, excuse me, this is Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel with TDLR. So we would be making, so we have several items. We have items I, J, and K. We're going to be making motions, or you all can choose to make a motion and recommendation on each of the items separately. And this maintains them cleanly, and you all know what you're voting on and recommending making motions on separately. So initially on this initial item, you'd be voting on this one first. So you need to look at each of them separately, and you would make a motion and recommendation independently in case you all have different items that you want to vote on.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. So I think the answer is, Dr. Mock, if is there any other, if barring any other discussion at this point, I think a motion is in order. Chair will entertain a motion regarding this item addressed in agenda item I.
This is Mariel Fernandez. Prior to making a motion, I have a quick question. Apologies.
Okay.
Is the motion specifically related to the wording in I? So is the motion specifically to recommending QABA and the QASP-S, or is the motion recommended to the work group's recommendation?
So this is Jessica Escobar. So the motion would be as to the board chooses. So the motion can be that the board recommends to accept the work group's recommendation to approve or deny, and that would be the recommendation to the commission, or I'm sorry, to the executive director. So you all can frame the motion however you all choose to do it. It doesn't have to be as it's worded in the agenda. So you all can choose how you want to word it to accept the work group's recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, Dr. Sokolowski.
Dr. Sokolowski. So I am moving that we accept the work group's recommendation to deny the request by this group. And it's a long name and I don't have it in front of me.
I think you're referring to the Qualified Applied Behavior Analyst Credentialing Board, Quaba, and the credential in question at this moment, this item is a Qualified Autism Services Practitioner, Supervisor, or QASPES certification.
Yes. And so we denied, as the work group, we denied that request, and my recommendation is that the board approve the work group's recommendation to deny the request.
Thank you. Second?
Mariel Fernandez, I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Fernandez. Call the question. Ms. Luna, if you will poll the members, please.
Yes, sir. Mariel Fernandez,
Approved.
Dr. Joyce Mock,
Approve.
Carol Sloan,
Approve.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski,
Approve.
Laurie Snyder,
Approve.
Brian Finley,
Approve.
and Dr. Gordon Borland, presenting officer.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Dr. Sokolowski, Mary Winston one more time. And I know you were struggling with the name of the long name,
Yeah.
but the motion was to accept or deny the approval of that credential, correct? And you made the motion to deny the approval of the credential, which was the conclusion of the work group, correct?
Yes, that's
And I
correct.
just wanted to make sure for the minutes that
Right.
we're all on board with that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winston, for that clarification. Moving to item J, discussion and possible recommendations regarding the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, QABA, as a department-approved certifying entity and accepting the Qualified Behavior Analyst or QBA certification for basis for a Texas Behavior Analyst license. Any discussion or questions regarding this? You've heard the recommendations of the work group. Hearing no questions or comments, Chair will entertain a motion regarding this issue.
Should we try it again? Stephanie Sokolowski.
Please continue.
We recommend to deny the request of QABA to become a licensed, to do what? Now what? See, now I'm mixed up again.
Department approved certifying entity, if I may suggest
Right.
some
Help
wording.
me with that, yeah. And that QBA does not meet eligibility based on our standards. I didn't do better this time. Oh,
Are you
That's
recommending approval of the work group's recommendation?
yes, but that got us in trouble the last time. So that's
Yes.
why I said I'm going to recommend that we deny the request.
Ms. Escobar, I believe you had a comment.
Jessica Escobar. I apologize for interrupting this late in the game, and I really would like to revisit the first recommendation because I think we transposed I and J, and I could be wrong because I feel like we said the QABA, but also I feel like somehow we said part of J, and I just want to have a very clear record as to what you all were voting on and leave nothing up for question. So if it's okay with you, Dr. Borland, I want to make sure that we have our recommendations very clear and our motions. So the motions for clarity, these are the motions that you will be making. The motions that you are making are not that the board is denying. You are recommending to the executive director that these credentials not be accepted. So for clarity, the board is not denying these. You are recommending to the executive director that these not be accepted based on the work group's findings. So going back around, I would read verbatim from here to say, for example, making a motion to recommend to the executive director, and I know we're going into minutia, but I want to make sure we have a very clear record, making a motion to the executive director to recommend that Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board is not an approved certifying entity and not accept the Qualified Autism Services Practitioner Supervisor certification for Texas Assistant Behavior Analyst. Does that make sense? That was a lot, but I just want to make sure we have a very clear understanding of what motions should be. And that way, if anybody looks back into the record, it's very clear what the board meant in their motion and was able to read the minutes and know what you all meant without having to go to YouTube. And Delia can transcribe easily.
Thank you for that clarification. So I'm not clear at this point. Should we then go back and revisit item I?
Please,
and
let's please do that.
And then entertain a motion that would, one, supersede the previous action.
Yes, please.
And then read approximately as you suggested. Okay. So reopening item I on the agenda. In light of the clarification, which I think is very important from Ms. Escobar, the chair reopens this item, entertaining a motion to replace or supersede the previous motion in that regarding this item with a rephrased version, affecting the end that the board seems to be wanting to recommend.
I have the wording in front of me. I will give it a try. This is Carol Sloan. This is Carol Sloan. And I would like to make a motion that we, the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board, make a recommendation to the Executive Director to recommend that the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, QABA, not be a department-approved certifying entity, and that we not, and recommend that the executive director not accept the Qualified Autism Services Practitioner Supervisor QASPES certification for a Texas Assistant Behavior Analyst license.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Mariel Fernandez, second.
Second. Thank you, Mariel. Barring any further clarification or discussion, Ms. Luna, will you call the roll again, please, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Mariel Fernandez.
Approve.
Dr. Joyce Monk.
Approve.
Carol Sloan.
Approve.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski.
Approve.
Laurie Snyder.
Approve.
Brian Finley.
Approve.
And Dr. Gordon Borland, presiding officer.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Returning to item J. Again, we are discussing whether the board recommendation by the board to the executive director regarding the Qualified Behavior Analyst Certifying Credentialing Board, excuse me, QABA be a department approved certifying entity, and regarding accepting the recommendation to the executive director regarding accepting the Qualified Behavior Analyst QABA certification for Texas Behavior Analyst license. Any comments or discussion regarding that issue? Hearing no comments or discussion, chair will entertain a motion.
Ms. Sloan, do you want to do that again? You did so well. You've got all those words right in front of you. Do you mind?
This is Carol Sloan. I will do it again. Yes. I motion that the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board make a recommendation to the executive director to recommend that we not recognize the qualified, that accept the work group's recommendation that the Qualified Applied Behavior Analysis Credentialing Board, QABA, not be a department approved certifying entity, and that not accept the Qualified Behavior Analyst QBA certification for a Texas Behavior Analyst license.
Thank you for that tag team motion. Is there a second?
Brian Finley, second.
Thank you, Mr. Finley. Motion being made and seconded. Ms. Luna, will you poll the members, please?
Mariel Fernandez,
Approve.
Dr. Joyce Mock, Dr. Mock,
Approve.
Thank you.
Carol Sloan,
Approve.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski,
Approve.
Laurie Snyder,
Approve.
Brian Finley,
Approve.
Dr. Gordon Borland, presenting officer.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much for the work on that motion. We come now to item K, a similar item. At this point, the floor is open for discussion and questions regarding possible recommendations to the executive director related to recognizing the Behavior Analysis Certification Council, BIC, as a department approved certifying entity and regarding accepting the board certified autism professional or BCAP credential for a Texas behavior analyst license. Open to comments or questions, discussion regarding this matter. Hearing no discussion, questions, comments, floor's chair is open to a motion in this regarding this issue.
Come on, Miss Sloan. You're on.
I didn't know if I could do all three. Okay. This is
You're doing
Carol
really well.
Sloan. This is Carol Sloan. I recommend a motion that the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board is recommending to the executive director that we accept the work group's recommendation and not recognize the Behavior Intervention Certification Council, BICC, as a department-approved certifying entity and not accept the board-certified autism professional, BCAP credential for a Texas behavior analyst license.
Thank you very much for the motion. Second?
Second.
Dr. Sokolowski seconds. Barring no further discussion, Ms. Luna, will you poll the members, please?
Yes, sir. Mariel Fernandez,
Approve.
Dr. Joyce Mock,
Approve.
Carol Sloan,
Approve.
Dr. Stephanie Sokolowski,
Approve.
Laurie Snyder,
Approve.
Brian Finley, I'm sorry,
Approve.
Dr. Gordon Borland, presenting officer.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much for your deliberation and expenditure of time and behavior on these important issues. We appreciate the work, again, appreciate the work group's input and the staff and everyone. Dr. Sokolowski.
So, Ms. Escobar, thank you so much for helping us clarify that so it's absolutely clear what we intended, because it got a little mixed up there.
This is Jessica Escobar. Thank you very much for indulging me. I know that was a little bit complicated and it's unlike anything that you all have probably done recently. So thank you for getting us through that process and coming back around to it. You all have done a great job.
Thank you very much. At this point, we've been meeting for almost 2 hours. Our agenda, we're getting close to the break, the agenda, but I would wonder if would be okay if we took about a 10-minute break before we come back and finish. If no one objects to that, the meeting will be in recess for 10 minutes, beginning now at 11:43 a.m. 53, the meeting of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board on June the 7th, 2022 will resume, come back to order. I believe we are ready to open agenda item L, update on the 4-year rule review of Chapter 121 in accordance with the government code. And I believe Ms. Escobar will be enlightening us.
Yes, Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel, TDLR. Thank you very much, members. So I wanted to give you an update. We talked previously a little bit during my presentation about the 4-year rule review, and here we are. We are actually in the process of 4-year rule review. So you may have received one of our email blasts letting you all know that we had actually just gone out for publication on the our rules, letting you know that we had an intent to review. So our comment period actually just closed May 31st. We only received one public comment, letting us know that they thought our rules were out there and the program should go on. So the next step for us is to have our internal meetings. So we are actually having meetings with staff this week to visit with them and let us know what their thoughts are on how the program is operating, whether the rules are doing what they should be. And from there, we'll kind of go on and begin the process for readoption of the rules. Now, based on those comments, we'll look at them and see, is there anything substantive based on my meetings with staff? We'll say, is there anything within the rules that we need to take a look at? Are there any cleanups needed to the rules, even just typos or anything? And then we'll go through an actual rulemaking process if necessary after that. So that's all I have for you. Just wanted to let you know that it is in process. And there's nothing needed from you at this time. So that is my report on the rule review.
Thank you, Ms. Escobar. Any questions or comments for Ms. Escobar regarding her report to the board? So to make sure I understand, so this may not entail any action by the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board unless there is thought to be some need for a reopening or reviewing or revising, replacing whatever one of the rules regarding the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board. Is that correct?
That is correct. And at that time, it would be just a normal course and scope of rulemaking, and that'll be months down the line, and we would bring that to you as just normal rulemaking.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Thank you. Moving to item M on the agenda, update on the adoption of amendments to the existing rule at 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 121, 121.169 regarding the Behavior Analyst Program. Ms. Escobar will update us on this also.
Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel, TDLR. Okay, board members, another one for you that kind of went off the beaten path. It's a rulemaking, but it didn't hit your desk. And so this is one that is a result of our sunset bill. So normally you all see all of our rulemakings that affect your chapter. However, this one didn't. So we had within our sunset bill, there were updates made to our chapter 51 of the Occupations Code, which is our which is the chapter that regulates all of TDLR. It's our enabling statute. And so what that did, what the sunset bill did, is it provided us the authority to allow all of our advisory boards to meet virtually and remotely. So it also provided that boards can meet at the call of the executive director or the presiding officer of the commission, which is in your current rules. So what we did to ensure consistency, align the rules, and take out redundancy is among all of our program rules, and there was 19 sets of rules that actually just went through the last commission meeting. There were amendments to all of them. So within your rules specifically, what was taken out was that redundant language that said you can meet at the call of the board. And this didn't affect you at all. That authority still exists in Chapter 51. It is unnecessary to be in your rules. That's all that happened there. So not anything that substantively affects what you all do as a board, and that authority is within the sunset bill. And so now you are meeting virtually as a result of our sunset bill, and you can continue to meet virtually. It was something that we had the authority to do during that started with the pandemic, and we are excited that we are able to continue doing that. And that is all I have for you.
Any questions or comments from the board regarding this? Didn't know if anyone wanted to complain because it means we don't have to go to Austin. Unless we want to. Any substantive comments? Thank you, Ms. Escobar. That's helpful and it's encouraging news, I think. So thank you. Moving to item N on the agenda. Recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting. Anything that you would like to, board members would like to suggest we address, perhaps anything that was just as a presentation or issues that have arisen prior to or during this meeting, please feel free to suggest them. Note will be made.
And this is Mary Winston, TDLR. If at this time we've had a very productive and very meaty sort of meeting, we've done a whole lot. If you can't think of anything at this moment, I always put our email out there. It's advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.com. .gov. I'm not putting out the right thing, but we will take those suggestions later. If you, after the meeting, think, oh, this is something we would like to discuss at a future meeting.
Yes, thank you. Certainly things may arise in the interim, as you're saying, so please forward those suggestions. Hearing no suggestions forthcoming at the moment, moving on to item O, discussion of the date, time, and location of the next board meeting. I'm not sure. Obviously, at this point, can't specify. I don't believe we can specify what that might be or when that might be. Ms. Luna will be polling the board at a later time regarding future times of the dates and times of future board meetings. Is there anything else we need to cover under that item?
I just make one comment, not about that item, but
Okay,
all
Dr.
of you work
Sokolowski.
very, yeah, Dr. Sokolowski, all of you work so hard, but I gotta tell you, Katie put in a lot of extra time getting us all that information together. And I really appreciate her enormous efforts in trying to keep us corralled. You can see by the report, oh my gosh, we went everywhere. But I just wanted to specifically say we really recommend. It was an enormous amount of work and we really appreciate all of that effort. So thank you.
Yes, I would agree with that for Ms. Bryce and all the other staff members who were involved with that activity. Hearing nothing else, I believe that we have reached item P, adjournment. It is now 12:01 p.m. on June the 7th, 2022, the meeting this date of the Behavior Analyst Advisory Board, Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation is adjourned. Thank you.